Attachment is an invisible, powerful, and silent force that arises in the human heart as a natural bond with what brings us pleasure, security, or identity. At its core, attachment isn't a villain. It's an emotional tendency that helps form affectionate ties, build families, communities, and even dreams. But when that attachment becomes dependence, it begins to control the mind, chaining us to things, people, or situations that may no longer make sense. The fear of loss turns into anticipatory pain. Just the thought of being without what we're attached to paralyzes us, wounds us, and turns us into prisoners of the past or of a future that may never come. At that moment, attachment stops being healthy and becomes an emotional trap. Uncontrolled attachment can destroy a person slowly without them even realizing it. It creates illusions. The illusion of control, the illusion of permanence, the illusion that something or someone outside ourselves can fill an internal void. When a relationship ends, when we lose something we thought was essential, or when reality doesn't match the fantasy we created, attachment turns into suffering. That's when many collapse. They feel they've lost everything, when in reality they only lost what they were holding on to too tightly. The problem is not loving or wanting. The problem is not being able to let go. The problem is identifying so deeply with something that, when it's gone, the person feels like they've lost themselves. And in that loss, they may sink into anxiety, depression, or a constant state of resistance against reality. One of the life philosophies that most strongly warned about the dangers of attachment, and which is still interpreted, studied, and practiced by millions around the world, is Buddhism. Buddhism is a millennia-old life philosophy that emerged in the 6th century BCE in what is now Nepal and northern India. With the teachings of Siddhartha Gautama, known as the Buddha, which means the awakened one. Unlike many religions, Buddhism is not centered around the worship of a deity, but rather on self-knowledge, mind observation, and liberation from suffering. Its foundational teachings lie in the Four Noble Truths, which reveal, first, that life contains suffering, dukkha. Second, that suffering has a cause, desire, and attachment. Third, that suffering can cease. And fourth, that there is a path to liberation, known as the Noble Eightfold Path. This path includes practices like meditation, ethical conduct, right effort, and mindfulness, all aimed at balancing the mind and awakening consciousness. The ultimate goal of Buddhism is not to accumulate merit or earn rewards after death, but to reach the state of nirvana, where the cycle of suffering and rebirth is transcended. Buddha's words on attachment still echo today as one of the pillars of Eastern philosophy. For him, attachment, or tanha, which in Pali means craving, is the main cause of human suffering. In his formulation of the Four Noble Truths, one of Buddhism's core teachings, he states, "The origin of suffering is desire. Specifically, the desire to hold on to what is pleasant, avoid what is unpleasant, and maintain the illusion of control over life." Buddha didn't condemn human emotion, but obsessive attachment, the kind that makes us believe we need something external to be whole. In one of his most well-known phrases, he teaches, "Attachment is the root of all suffering." It's not love that destroys us, but the inability to love without obsession over possession, permanence, or control. The path to liberation, according to him, is conscious detachment, the ability to let go of what we cannot hold on to. But it wasn't just Buddhist philosophy that warned about the dangers of attachment. Stoicism, one of the most influential philosophical schools of antiquity, also offered a powerful and similar perspective on this very issue. Founded by Zeno of Citium in the 3rd century BCE in Athens, and developed by great minds like Seneca, Epictetus, and the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, this philosophy wasn't made just to be thought, it was made to be lived. Stoicism teaches that true happiness does not depend on the external world, but on how we respond to it. Its core principles revolve around the idea that we should live in accordance with nature, guided by reason, virtue, and self-control. Among the pillars of Stoicism are the dichotomy of control, understanding what is within our power, our actions, thoughts, and attitudes, and what is not, the behavior of others, the weather, politics, death. Virtue as the highest good, consisting of wisdom, courage, justice, and moderation, and the constant practice of emotional detachment, not as coldness, but as inner freedom. As Epictetus said, it's not events that disturb people, but their judgments about them. Epictetus was one of Stoicism's great masters. He lived between 55 and 135 CE, during a time when Rome was marked by political crises, wars, and moral instability. What's most impressive is that he was born a slave. That's right, one of the greatest sages in human history began his life deprived of freedom. But it was precisely that experience that shaped his Stoic worldview. He understood that even when chained from the outside, a person can be completely free on the inside. His philosophy was practical, direct, and powerful. To him, the only thing that truly belongs to us is our will, what we think, feel, and choose. Everything outside of that, wealth, fame, health, other people's behavior, is indifferent. And this is exactly where Stoicism confronts attachment head-on. Epictetus taught that attachment arises from the illusion that we can control the external world. But this illusion, he said, is the root of nearly all suffering. In his philosophical manual, Enchiridion, he writes, "Do not seek for things to happen as you wish, but wish for things to happen as they do, and you will find peace." In other words, the Stoic does not try to shape the world to fit their will. They shape their will to fit the nature of the world. This means letting go of attachment to outcomes, to people, to uncontrollable desires. Stoic detachment isn't emotional coldness, it's practical wisdom. It's understanding that you can't lose what was never really yours. As Epictetus said, "Remember that you are an actor in a play. If it is short, then it is short. If it is long, then it is long. Your role is to accept it as it is." This philosophy invites us to live lightly, to accept impermanence, and to focus only on what we control: our conduct, our choices, and our inner freedom. Attachment can be seen not just as a mistake in perception, but as a true addiction of the soul, an emotional dependence that erodes inner freedom. When someone lives disconnected from any kind of spiritual practice or deep reflection about life, they tend to over-identify with what is external and fleeting: material possessions, social achievements, compliments, appearances. This attachment isn't limited to physical objects, but extends to subtle desires, and like the endless pursuit of status, validation, and public recognition. The soul in that state becomes restless, always hungry for more, unable to find peace in the present. And the more it clings to these illusions, the farther it drifts from its essence, and the more vulnerable it becomes to suffering. True spiritual growth begins when we realize that everything external can vanish. and that real strength lies in not needing anything to feel complete. Jesus, the greatest spiritual teacher of all time, is a central figure not only in the Christian tradition, but in the history of humanity. Born in Bethlehem in the 1st century CE, he didn't just challenge the religious and social norms of his time. He brought a radical message of love, forgiveness, and detachment that transcends time and space. Jesus' view on attachment is deep and radical. He doesn't condemn material goods or emotional bonds, but firmly warns against the danger of placing our hearts in worldly things and becoming enslaved by them. In several passages of the New Testament, Jesus makes a direct call to detachment as a path to spiritual freedom. In Matthew 6:19-21, he says, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Here, Jesus reveals that the real problem doesn't lie in the object itself, but in the excessive value we assign to it. In Christ's view, attachment distracts us from our higher mission: to love God above all things, with a free, unattached heart that is open to a greater good. In another striking moment, Jesus directly confronts a rich young man who wants to follow him but cannot let go of his wealth. In Mark 10:21-22, Jesus says, "Go, sell all you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come, follow me." The young man walks away sad because he was too attached to his possessions. Here, Jesus isn't demanding poverty for its own sake, but inner freedom, the ability to not rely on anything to live fully. He warns, no one can serve two masters. You cannot serve both God and money. Matthew 6:24. For Jesus, attachment is a direct obstacle to true spiritual life. Letting go of it is an act of faith, courage, and total surrender. Detachment is not the goal. It is the necessary path to love truthfully, live lightly, and walk a path of compassion and purpose. Stoicism, Buddhism, and Christianity all share the idea that attachment is a source of suffering and must be overcome. In all these philosophies, detachment is not about renouncing the world, but about living with greater freedom, wisdom, and compassion, without being enslaved by desire or possession. It's absolutely possible to have money, many possessions, and still live with detachment. And here's the secret that the great spiritual and philosophical traditions have taught for millennia. The problem isn't the things, it's how much the things control you. Doctrines like Stoicism, Buddhism, and Christianity never said that wealth is wrong, or that comfort is a sin, or that success is harmful. The key lies in how you relate to all of it. Imagine someone who has a mansion, luxury cars, and a huge bank account, but who, if they lost it all tomorrow, could still remain at peace. That is true detachment. The true essence of detachment doesn't lie in giving up material possessions, but in not letting them take over your life. It's when you realize that your happiness, your peace, and your worth don't depend on what you own, but on the lightness of being able to move forward without the constant fear of loss. In that moment, you reach a kind of wealth no vault could ever contain. Detachment is like cutting the ropes that tie you to fear, anxiety, and the need to prove something. The freedom that comes from this is irreplaceable. Possessions stop being golden cages and become simply tools you use wisely. You don't bow to them, they serve you. And so, even surrounded by luxury, success, and abundance, you remain whole, grounded, unshakable, with your feet on the earth and your spirit free as the wind.